this experience was something that was not only profound and changed my life, and that's really is an understatement, but I'm also going to actually do something a little special for this one because I do have my full trip report that I wrote down, and it's going to be even more detailed than this if you're interested in reading it. And I'm going to link that into the description. I'm probably going to make like a Google Doc out of it or something. We'll see. You know, I think it's more accurate for me to call this a near-death experience because it wasn't something that I was seeking out, it just happened to me. And also because I have a lot of similarities to near-death experiences with mine that I haven't read in 5-MeO DMT experiences. Like I talked about in my last video, just some examples like Abyss, I encountered these parallel realities I went to. I don't think this is something that's just like an interesting thing to talk about. I think there's much more to it, and this is actually the second take of this because the first one didn't go too well. That's why I wrote down a bunch of notes. I was having a real hard time figuring out how to describe this, but I guess I'll just kind of read it and kind of work off of that. And so at some point while traveling in this void, I became aware of these lines of light in this infinite space. They were these lines of yellow-white light streams moving through the dark void I was in, all moving in their own lines of being. They were small specks of white hyperdimensional lines traveling through this black infinite dimension we were in. They looked like lines or infinite seams. I'll just call them soul seams. This all felt very five-dimensional, so it's impossible for me to describe. I remember feeling like I was seeing the paths of every living thing in existence, but that I was separated from them and could not collide with them. At some point during this experience, I became aware of the enormous size of this space. As I was traveling through it for unimaginable amounts of time by now, as this infinite superatom of pure awareness with no way of stopping. What was terrifying about this place was that I was moving through it freely at speeds that I couldn't comprehend or explain. Yet I had zero destination or place I was going to. It was immensely massive and infinite. I didn't know who or what I was, but I knew that I was moving through this place somehow consciously. It defies explanation. I can't even begin to describe how insignificant I felt in comparison to this place. I felt like a speck of conscious dust that somehow entered into the realm that God navigates through. So, this soulscape I experienced connected to this next portion of the experience that I want to talk about, and that's kind of why I'm trying to clarify it here. I saw a white light, this white light or place that these souls were going into, which was very indescribable, because it's like I could see the start of these lives and all the encompassing experience. And I know I'm repeating myself, but it's very hard to describe, but it was very profound. And I remember seeing that they all eventually went to this source, whatever this was. And this was before I ended up going. I went to these parallel realities, which I talked about in this last experience, and went into this deep, dark despair. And I just gave up. At that point is when the experience started to change. As I sunk down into this deep despair, which was just the lowest, I just talked about it in my last experience. There's no need to like rehash it too much, but I began to feel this warm, loving, indescribably comforting, blissful. I don't really have a descriptive word for this. It was a place is all I could describe it as. A place that it arrived towards me and I also became a part of. It was like this white light that was just brighter with this depth that I cannot describe. This is where it's hard to describe to you guys what this place was, and I did describe it in my experience, so I'm gonna try and see here what I said. There was this hyperdimensional fabric stitched between all of the void and nothingness that I had been a part of. This place was the core source connecting all of reality to itself and transfusing purpose, life, and meaning to everything that it touched, including all of reality itself and everything I had ever went through and been a part of. It felt like contrast of this dark despair transform into something complete and with purpose, and it felt like I went home. This love I felt there felt like a mother's love times a million trillion. I'll talk about my thoughts of this after it, because I just want to give you guys the pure experience what I experienced first. But that is what I experienced. It was astonishing. Okay, so I said that darkness, sadness, grief, and confusion all dissipated and became answers, security, and meaning. There was this profound energy essence that was calling, reaching, and pulling me into it. They knew everything about me. I say they because it felt alive and conscious, completely aware of my suffering. But this was not a physical body, not a form. They had no identity or gender. This was a conscious place. Not only that, but it was as if I had already known everything about this place and all of the answers, but had somehow forgotten. Initially, it was like I had a deja vu that was overwhelming, and that's kind of throughout this whole experience. And then as soon as I began to be filled with this understanding is when I realized that I have been to this place before, and not only that, I had always known about this place, and I would always come back to this place eventually. That is the impression I got, was that I would always eventually lead back to this place. That was very comforting. This experience made me unafraid of death. It did many things, very positive things in my life. But in many ways, it made life very difficult, especially coming back from this experience. My feelings of sadness, regret, and despair turned into an array of feelings too complex to describe. Renewal, understanding, divine ecstasy, comfort, and belonging all at once. Unfortunately, these words cannot begin to describe these feelings. Somehow in this hyperdimensional realm beyond death, I became alive and loved. So that was the thing that was so shocking and hard for me to wrap my head around about this experience, was that I felt more alive than I will ever feel in this life, ever. And that was the really shocking thing about coming back to this place, this physical realm, was that I felt like everything. Somebody else described this in I'm probably gonna put a little clip of somebody else talking about this and their experience, because it really hit me hard when I heard them talking about this.
It was like being in a cartoon, only I wasn't just in the cartoon, watching the cartoon, I was the cartoon. Like my body was the cartoon, and my thoughts were the cartoon, and all of my senses were the cartoon, and the cartoon was outside of me and inside of me, and it was super confusing. All my soul wanted was to be back in the oneness of being. And now here I am in this broken apart place where everything, where all the love and the beauty and the truth and the hope and the joy, or it's all fragmented here. But so is everything else. It's not just those things. Everything is fragmented here. Everything is not in union with the divine.
But I had a very similar experience where when I came back, this felt like a 2D, low quality and extremely confined and scattered, chaotic reality. And it's really hard to describe how lonely it feels to have something like that, experience something like that. Nobody in your life really understand it. So I talked about the feeling of this place, and that was just the feeling. But now I'm gonna try my best to describe what this looked like to you, so you can kind of get an idea of what I experienced. It was a space directly above that I became a part of. Imagine a white void with a circumference immeasurable yet fluid and complete, a circular hyperdimensional infinite being, if you will. This circular infinite hyperdimensional being held a web of light that was between and infused all of the void I was previously in. They were holding it and me like a baby in a womb. In the middle of these webs were gateways connecting to all points of realizations of life. It was a giant library of all secrets and truths. There were realizations in the middle that I was seeing all at once. I can't describe it as one singular vision though, as I was traveling through each and every one of these connected webs of realizations. It was like one question would begin, and in the next instant, I was reading a book, or rather becoming the story, and understanding each and every dynamic story. Everything was instant and completely connected and understood. That's what was shocking about just the instant transfer of information that was just fully understood by me instantly. That is what made this experience so undeniable that I can't even, I have no explanations or logic that can make my brain go, this was a fake experience. This felt faster than anything you could imagine. And the amount of knowledge that was being poured into me, it didn't feel like it was just like a stale, like, oh, I know everything and that's it. There's nothing more to know. It felt fluid and complex and growing and living, and all these words can't even describe what this felt like, but it was incredible. And you know, I was only 16 when I had this experience, you know, and I saw in this experience that I was completely like I was a new slate. I felt like I was a complete new slate because I had no identity. That's the one thing that kind of separates my experience from near-death experiences. I felt my soul for what it is completely, and I was that. I didn't have a body. Didn't have an identity. I didn't even know about my life or what this was. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I'm Alden having this experience. You know, I didn't feel like I was a name. I didn't feel like I had an identity. I was just this pure, raw innocence that was just being catapulted throughout this entire experience. And it was very chaotic and intense. The despair and everything I went through, even this beautiful source I went to, because it was not done. I just described what it was like to go to this source. I had this dread and horrible feeling wash over me as I sunk back out of this place and back into this despair. I felt like more vulnerable and more of a blank slate than a baby. And I remember I went back to this despair, this dark despair. It was like this sadness beyond anything I could describe. This place came back to me. This source and this beautiful euphoria and belonging and understanding filled my being again, and I was like, oh, I'm back. And I just, this deja vu just kept flooding me every single time I went back to this despair and back to this place. And it just kept happening for what felt like an eternity, and it felt like between each time this happened, the spurts of being in that darkness were shorter, and then the spurts of being in this beautiful source was, because the time doesn't exist in this place. So this is like a place between, if you can imagine a place between time in its own. Time did not exist in this place. So it's really hard to describe to you, but I felt like I went through this experience that felt like they were showing me something. They were showing me the contrast of this darkness and why this mattered. Without this darkness, I would not be able to understand this place of true being and belonging. But that I was also a part of both of these places, this darkness and this light. And I was shown this in an extremely fine and unfiltered way. How everything works, how karma works, why we have contrasts, and how I felt like I was shown the true nature of reality. You know, eventually I came back from that experience after this. It wasn't like, oh, I'm back here. Oh, this is so familiar. It was very shocking because I had felt like I was stripped from my home and put into a place that I didn't want to or belong. It was very difficult to come to terms with this experience. Not only did I feel like I saw where we go, but I felt like I had that taken from me. But I clearly came back here for a reason. I wasn't given a reason, so I don't know why I came back, and I wasn't given a life review. It was very hard to come back, and I remember being very angry, and also opened doors in my reality that I could not close. I remember coming to realize that the power of my soul and the power of other people's souls, and I'll just put it that way. I realized a lot of things that, you know, I don't think it's right to talk about because, you know, it's really personal. And for about a year after this experience, I just didn't feel like anything was real. I mean, where I was at was way realer than this, and like not just a tiny bit. It was astronomically realer than this experience. And so this just felt like a cartoon compared to it, this life. That experience was far more experience than I've ever experienced in this life. It was very difficult. Did I write down anything? Let's see here. Yeah, so I just said here, I remember coming back to reality and being astonished, confused by the notion of physical reality. A restricted and typical awareness, so systematic and bound. Somehow it felt sad. I was wondering where I had ended up. I didn't remember my body, mind, or anything. Slowly it all became familiar as my inner dialogue from earlier in the day started to creep back in and tell me the thoughts I was having before the experience. It was almost as if it was continuing where it had left off. Then I had realized I was back in my body. Yeah, I mean, that was basically my entire experience, and it's something I'm living with my whole life. I'll be questioning it, and not only that, but I didn't ask for an experience like that. It happened to me. But I did have some interesting coincidences before it happened, which I talk about in my written trip report. That gives some insights on that. So what I learned from this experience that really stuck with me was that we are so disconnected from each other. We have a purpose. We are here. This entity I encountered, whatever you want to call them, God, Source, the universe, They were so merciful and loved me for who I was. And they love you and everybody that same way. This is the impression I got. They don't care about your sexuality, your gender, your opinions, morals, none of that. All they wanted me to know was that I am loved. I have a place to go back to. And I just want people to treat each other kindly. That's my one wish I have in this life, is that people treat each other kindly and be open-minded to other people. I wish people could just get along with each other, because this life is so insignificant. We're here for a reason. That reason I believe has a great effect on whatever this plan is, whatever our souls are, whatever we are here for. I don't think you should take life too seriously, but you should understand there is a purpose for this place, and you should treat people here accordingly. You shouldn't treat them like they're pieces of advertisement, profit, or treat people like their lives are just like they're just 1 in 7 billion. Who cares? People should not be treated that way, and it makes me. That's the thing that makes me so sad about this planet, is what I've seen. The pain people are going through, the suffering, the injustice, the unopen-mindedness, the divisiveness, the politics, the unauthenticity. And there's lots of beautiful things in this life as well too, and it's not everything's negative. But that's what I want people to try and take from my experience, and why I want to share my experience is what I've integrated and how I've grown as a person from this experience. And I really ultimately want people to grow. That's why I'm sharing this experience with you. And if you've had an experience like this, you're welcome to share it. I appreciate you all for watching, and I hope that you have a great day. All right, have a good one. Peace.